They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Antisemitism and a terror attack coming together in Washington, D.C., an incredibly tragic story, and we are going to unpack it and really how it's this type of behavior, Katie, is being pushed on our college campuses across the country. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka, and we're not so happy today.
No, it's just these stories like this are tragic, and now they are taking people's lives. So let's talk about it. But first, let's bring in our guest. Morgonn McMichael is here. She is a Turning Point USA contributor. She is a Gen Z political commentator, and you can give her a follow at Morgonn M, MorgonnM on X and on social media. Morgonn, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you both for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to just add my Gen Z female insight and talk about all these stories and more.
And this is what we need. Let's start with the details on this story. It was Wednesday night in Washington, D.C., where two Israel embassy staff members were murdered in a shooting outside of the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. That's where the American Jewish Committee was hosting an event on Wednesday night. They were a couple. Apparently, they were supposed to get engaged next week in Jerusalem, and a man, a 30-year-old, Elias Rodriguez, approached them on the street, killed them both, murdered them at point-blank range, then walked into the building, and apparently was even encountered by someone, kind of the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. Morgonn, this woman coming out of the elevator saw this guy who looked disturbed, offered him water, and this happened to be the shooter. And he then said, free Palestine. He was arrested, taken into custody, and now we're uncovering his manifesto. And this has really sparked a big discussion amongst conservatives and just sane-minded people about this anti-Semitism that is raging in our country and really is being perpetuated on our college campuses.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with this kind of behavior that is happening in our country, not domestic abuse, but domestic terrorism is what I'll call it. It is now becoming more normalized. And unfortunately, I don't think this is going to be the last kind of attack of this sort. And unfortunately, a lot of Jewish Americans are having to fear for their lives because of the rhetoric that is being spewed, not just on college campuses, but also by the left on social media and just in the media in general. It's really unfortunate and heartbreaking to see, two of the Israeli embassy workers being shot and killed this week in Washington, D.C. I live 15 minutes from the Capitol, and it really is a constant threat and kind of idea that sometimes we have to think about, even just living so close to our nation's capital, is, what is going to happen, especially post October 7th, when we saw Hamas really just make a mark on Israel. And now the retaliation has gone on continuously. But it's just really unacceptable that this is happening on American soil.
Yeah, this one hit really close to home for me as well. I mean, it's so shocking to wake up and find out. First of all, I'm only about 20 or 25 minutes from where this happened, so it felt close to home in that sense. But, the whole idea that this young couple, just at the start of their lives together, were shot point blank. It's incredible. But, the piece of it that I would love to talk about is, what motivated this guy. We know that he's got his manifesto out, but it's also interesting when you look at his history. My co-author on the book that I wrote with Mike Gonzalez, Next Gen Marxism, we looked a lot at how socialism has infected our college campuses. And Mike posted this morning that he found that Elias Rodriguez was a former member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation and had marched for Black Lives Matter. I think the really important point here is that too many of us, okay, not me, too many other people take kind of a benign view of socialism and just say, well, it's a nicer, gentler way of looking at the world, or socialism is really just a focus on how the economy is organized. But that's not true. It is so much more insidious than that. And really, the heart of socialism is the Marxist view that people are pitted against each other. The idea that you have an oppressor and an oppressed, and that basically, because some people are oppressed, it almost gives them free rein to do anything they want against the oppressor. And that's what I see here. I imagine that we will see mental health issues, which is often the case in these shooters. But I also think even without the mental health issue, you have somebody that's clearly motivated by an ideology that's telling him it's okay to go and kill these other people because their ideology is at odds with yours. I know that, Morgonn, you've been a lot on our college campuses. You've been at the heart of some of this tension. I would love to know more about what you're seeing. And is this really as widespread as some of us fear it is?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct that the socialist democracy clubs on these campuses are very prevalent. So just as much as you have Turning Point USA chapters and Charlie Kirk showing up to these college campuses and myself being on these college campuses, there is still the left that is promoting the ideology of Marxism, handing out Karl Marx, handing out the Communist Manifesto for students to read and inviting them to their club meetings in America. And I think that that's something that if you don't recognize and understand the freedom that you have in this country, that you are even able to attend a socialist democracy, which is really just Marxism in a pretty packaged type of club, then I think you need to recheck your freedoms, because there's no other country where that would be allowed. But college campuses today are continuing to see protests. We're continuing to see Free Palestine chants everywhere that we go. I want to highlight, we were at San Francisco State just a couple of weeks ago. And what started out as a pretty tame event, no real protesters, just about 30 minutes in, a huge crowd of students gathered, chanting about Palestine, chanting about Black Lives Matter. And I went and interviewed them, what do you guys think of Charlie Kirk? And of course, they all disliked Charlie Kirk. They all didn't want him there. And they're like, why would you even come here? And then, of course, when you ask them, oh, he's a fascist. You ask them, what is a fascist? They can't tell you. Oh, what is socialism? They can't actually tell you what they believe in, what these ideologies that have been perpetrated on these college campuses are. And unfortunately, it is people like Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA showing up on these college campuses that really is conservatives' only saving grace, because we're working against the machine every single day. College campuses don't want us on their campuses. It is very difficult to even get a Turning Point chapter on most of these college campuses. So when we show up and you see crowds of thousands of conservatives showing up, they know that they're outnumbered. And that's another thing. Yes, while the socialism and the Marxism is being pushed on college campuses, there is also an alternative agenda, which I'll say, the conservative movement is alive and well. At a lot of these campuses, you will see thousands of kids walking around with red MAGA hats on, showing up for Charlie Kirk. And I think that's honestly a really wonderful sight to see, because the college landscape and the political landscape with Gen Z is completely different than it was in 2016 and 2020, where now Gen Z isn't afraid to actually stand up for their beliefs. It kind of reminds me of when the Hamas encampments were going on these college campuses, where you saw the fraternity boys kind of show up with American flags and start singing the national anthem. I think we're going to see a lot more of that coming in the next couple of years on college campuses.
I want to come back to that, because that's actually one of the big questions I have is growing that support on college campuses. But I want to drill into something that you said. I was listening this morning to Fox and Friends, and our colleague here at Salem, Mark Levin, was on the program, and he was talking, and he made this point. And we talk about Marxists and we talk about terrorists, but he was talking about this intersection of terrorist behavior and Marxist behavior, and how this terrorist ideology has sort of, I think probably the best way to paraphrase what he was saying is it's co-opted kind of this Marxist lane that we have on college campuses, and that we've heard the stories now that there's communication between Hamas and the college campuses. So I guess my question, since you've been out there talking to people, are these individuals that you're coming across on college campuses lemmings? Are they just kind of following along with the message? Or to what extent do you think these outside, really evil organizations are influencing them?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think a lot of these students are kids that are liberals that, have the nose piercings, they have the tattoos, they're a little bit more grunge, and they're just joining the crowd because they think it's trendy and cool and they're seeing a protest on social media. It's like the next new thing. Are there paid protesters? Absolutely. It depends on the school, it depends on the region. When I'm in Seattle, Washington, and you see all of the Antifa members that are clearly paid agitators showing up with their ACAB t-shirts and wearing their all black covered head to toe, like you definitely know who Antifa is versus just a college student who's protesting. And then when it comes to intelligence coming from actual terrorist organizations to the Marxist clubs and different students in America, I believe it. I think there's definitely a real chance that a lot of these students are being persuaded, being taught, being kind of messaged by individuals from other countries. And I think that's a very real threat that we're facing in our country is these Marxist clubs, these self-proclaimed Antifa members, anti-fascists. I don't think that they're doing this by accident. It's very intentional what they're doing when it comes to agitating what I believe is the right side.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right about that. And I think hopefully we're going to go back to investigating what are the sources of funding for some of these clubs and who are some of the organizers. I think it's interesting when you look at some of the people that the Trump administration is wanting to throw out of the country. They say they're students, but they're here for years. They're well into their 20s, even into their 30s. It really looks strongly like they are here to organize and agitate. But there is another dimension to this, which I think we as Americans have to take more responsibility for. And the fact is that these clubs and these groups are in our high schools. So I can just say from a very personal perspective here in Fairfax County, we wanted to do a look at, are there high school Republican clubs or high school conservative clubs, anything like that, right? And it was incredible because out of our, let's say approximately 25 high schools, there were maybe two, I think there was one Republican, one conservative club in a high school. Every single high school has a socialist club or even the Democratic Socialist Club of America or Democrat club. And I just, I think that parents aren't looking enough at this. Unfortunately, I think a lot of parents don't even have visibility into what goes on in these schools. But we need to take seriously what our kids are being indoctrinated with in these schools. So anyway, I would love to shift because Turning Point is just such a good news story in our world. I think, we are all so grateful to Charlie and just his incredible vision, his charisma, everything that he has been able to do for young people and the incredible people like you who he has found and made part of the team. But I am particularly excited about one of your upcoming events, which is the Young Women Leadership Summit, right? You've got that coming up just in a few weeks.
Yes, we're super excited to host. I believe this is our 10th anniversary of the Young Women's Leadership Summit, which is incredible to know that this event of young women started with maybe 20 girls in a conference room, which has now blossomed into over 3,000 attendees with some of the biggest name speakers in the movement. I know Alina Habba will be there, Ali Beth Stuckey, Alex Clark. We have Riley Gaines, which will be there. We just have all of, I think, the Cool Girls Club coming to speak to young women. And actually, me attending the Young Women's Leadership Summit was my first ever Turning Point event in 2021. And it's partially the reason why I got into politics and felt empowered enough to speak out and use my voice after facing cancel culture, because you're surrounded by so many like-minded women listening to what I think is real women's empowerment, not the fake feminism. This is where all women can come together of all ages. You have sometimes newborn babies all the way up to grandmas coming. I know my mom and sister are coming with me. So that's happening June 13th through the 15th in Dallas, Texas at the Gaylord Resort. I think it's ywls2025.com. And if you use my name, you get 25% off. So you should register today. Use code MORGO. And then I'd have to give a little plug there. But truly, it is the best event ever. Like, grab your girlfriends or go solo. You'll meet some of the best friends you'll have in life.
I love it. And I love how you say it's real women's empowerment, because one of the things that absolutely drives me nuts, Morgan, is where the real feminists have gone. I mean, they're willing to give up sports. They're willing to give up, they're creating all these special categories. I mean, it's like, we want to protect women. We want to protect children. We want to empower women. And it seems like today's leftists are not like the feminists of even our parents' generation. Yeah, they were liberal, but they were fighting for women. Now it seems like they're doing anything but. And I'm happy that they're doing this conference, and people should use your code, Morgan, to get 25% off. It's fabulous. Now, I want to talk about hope with Turning Point USA, because one of the things that we saw in this election, and I think it's a testament to Charlie, certainly, and I think Charlie would agree it's a testament to President Trump. The fact that he was able to make gains with young people, especially with the backdrop of the media saying he can't make gains with women or minorities or young people, he did just that. And I think it's because he doesn't put on airs. I mean, the perfect example was the meeting that he had in the White House with the South African president. Where is there a politician on the planet who would sit there and, instead of just talking, even broaching the subject of genocide, actually showing video of the South African parliament threatening white farmers in South Africa? This guy has backbone, and he's not afraid to just speak truth. And I think there's something about that is empowering. Does that help bring in young voters? What do you think Trump's factor is that brought in young voters? And how can Republicans use that moving forward to continue to bulk up our movement, to widen the tent?
Yeah, I think Gen Z, this election, really changed a lot of minds about our generation. What was usually thought of, misinformed, always on social media, doesn't really know what's going on in politics. I mean, people thought Gen Z was going to show up for Kamala Harris, but that was not the case. I mean, we had a 13-point shift to the right. And we saw, especially men, were shifting more conservative than we've ever seen before. Young conservative men right now, Gen Z men, are more conservative than their grandparents are. If you're over the age of 74, that is staggering to know what is going on these campuses. And I genuinely think they're fed up with what's being fed in the culture. This isn't super political. We don't have to make it super political. But Gen Z cares about culture and what is going on. And ever since Donald Trump rode down that escalator in 2015, announcing his presidency, he became the cool guy. And like I said before, conservatism on college campuses is cool. From 2016 to 2020, even to 2024, you would not see many kids strutting around with MAGA hats on. A lot of kids wouldn't tell you that they're conservative. But now you actually have Gen Zers that are loud and proud, making content on social media and talking about politics like never before. And honestly, I do think we have social media to thank for that. Because after censorship kind of took a dip in around, I want to say 2022, 2023, conservative content was able to actually flourish online for the first time, to where it wasn't just the same liberal talking points over and over, and conservative commentators were no longer becoming banned on these platforms, and instead platforms were uplifting them. I know that is still true today. I mean, Charlie even talks about it all the time, how he used to not have a TikTok. He was banned on TikTok, then got unbanned, and his content is doing better than ever before. I know that my content has amassed millions of views on social media, and so many other commentators have as well. And we're providing a different voice. And that's the whole thing, is we have to break out of the left and the right echo chambers and actually talk about what's going on in culture and politics. That's one piece. The second piece I will say is, within the culture impact, is Donald Trump himself. He is a cool politician. He is not a politician, which makes him so cool. You know, he was in Hollywood. He was beloved by kind of so many big stars. And then he has that don't care attitude where he will do anything. He has grit. And I think a lot of young Americans really look up to him in that way and know that, you know, even if I don't like his attitude, he'll still put the country first. And he actually cares about the betterment of them and the American people. And then lastly, I'll say is that Gen Z care about their future. They care about getting jobs, they care about making money, and they care about raising their future families. And that is a vision that Donald Trump actually provided Gen Z that Kamala Harris did not. Unfortunately, I think is where social media for Kamala Harris really, gave her a disadvantage, because she was appealing to the wrong side of Gen Z. Instead, she was using music artists, basically calling Gen Z dumb and that they were uninformed and uneducated. And unfortunately, that's not going to work anymore when you do have some very bright young people who genuinely are just hungry and thirsty for the truth.
So you made a really interesting point about the generational divide. So you said something about young men being more conservative than the grandfathers if the grandfathers are over 74. What I find super interesting is for my age, when I think about the grandfathers, it was really the greatest generation, right? It was the ones who had fought in World War II, maybe Korea, probably the ones who were just a little bit before Vietnam. And they were super conservative. They were conservative. They were patriotic. They loved this country. They knew what they had been fighting for. I think the problem with the grandparent generation right now, and these are kind of some of the ones that you're talking about, is these are the ones that grew up on college campuses in the 1960s. And I think that's why you see so many of them actively engaged these days, because I think they're all unrepentant 60 radicals. And, I've met some of them and they just, they still hold on to those ideals. And I think that's why you're seeing such a divide. But let me ask you this, because, from my perspective, so I'm taking off my podcaster hat, putting on my Fairfax GOP hat. Here's the challenge that I see. So I am a big believer that my generation, the older generation, actually should carry the water for the political work, right? Because our kids are out of the house. Many of us are retired. We've got more time on our hands. So I have no problem that we are doing the bulk of the volunteer work. But I think we can't neglect the younger generation. And I know that everybody around me, so many of the people involved in the Fairfax GOP get really upset when they don't see young faces, when they don't see the young people engaging. What do you think is the solution here? Like, is it that there really do have to be different groups? Like there's the mainstream GOP groups, and then you have high school Republicans or young Republicans. And do you think that, for example, your generation, TPUSA has a really cool sort of mystique, right? It's a cool group to be a part of. And maybe that's the way to go, and not to be a part of mainstream Republican efforts. But where do you think it's going to go? How do we solve this?
We don't fix politics until we fix the culture and we fix society. And I think that is something that Turning Point USA is doing a really good job at doing on high schools. I mean, I can say that Turning Point USA itself, we have more high school chapters across the country than we do college chapters. Wow. And over 1,000 high schools have a Turning Point USA chapter present. And I think that's something that we need to focus on, is continuing to actually have just pro-America leaflets, having fun speaker events, and changing the culture and actually providing an alternative narrative in these classrooms and on these college and high school campuses. Because as much as I would love to say, yes, I think that Gen Z should get involved with their local GOPs, with their local elections, they should be poll watching, they should be helping door knock. I think that is a goal that is sometimes harder to get the younger generation actually motivated for, but it's a lot easier to get young people to talk about it on social media, which in the end, I do think is going to help sway elections in the future, especially within people that are like-minded to them. Like me posting a tweet can easily do a lot of work. And I know there's a lot of other young conservatives who may not even have followings, but they're talking to their peers. They're involved in politics in a little bit different capacity than being involved. So I do think that having a group like Young Republicans, having groups like Turning Point USA provide that outlet of community, because the young people also need other young people of like-mindedness to be surrounded by them. And, there's always going to be a couple of super passionate kids that are involved with the adults and that are involved with the elections and the campaigns. But I think that politics is starting to take a little bit of a shift of how it's going to evolve over the next decade, especially as technology and social media start to play an even bigger role in elections.
Yeah, I think social media is key, and it's something that people are already doing. I mean, it's just like drinking water and eating breakfast. I mean, it's second nature, and spreading the word is huge. And I think it already had an impact on this election. I had an interesting conversation with someone yesterday, actually, on my morning radio show about what's next for the Republican Party. So I'm curious to know, Morgonn, from a Gen Z perspective, hanging out on college campuses, who is that generation, your generation, looking at as our future leaders? Obviously, Trump has got it. He's got the it factor. He's doing great. Greatest president of my lifetime, hands down. That being said, JD Vance, Marco Rubio, I'd throw in Charlie Kirk into that conversation. I would throw Riley Gaines into that conversation. I think she can be an incredible leader, and she's so well spoken. Who are some of the people that you're hearing from the younger generation that they'd like to see get involved in the political landscape?
I think there's so many huge conservative voices in the space right now. Charlie has talked about how he's not going to run. He is making arguably more impact now with how many viewers he has, especially with young and old people. So Charlie definitely is up there. Riley is as well. As regards to actual political engagement, I genuinely, personally think that JD Vance is a great candidate option for 2028, which really excites me because he is so young, has the experience, has a wonderful backstory. And I think that really resonates with a lot of the country. But then I also think about, it doesn't have to be any of these huge talking heads that are getting involved in politics. I think that Gen Z needs to be encouraged that once they have a little experience under their belt, and not even having to go to college, just getting a job and working in America, should feel encouraged to go out there and get involved locally and even statewide elections and actually make a difference if they're passionate about it. I think we're going to see a lot more new rising voices that we don't see or know yet in the coming years.
And I think importantly, a lot of them will have gotten their inspiration and their training through Turning Point USA. And the other great, I think, huge contributor to what's going on, we have to give them a shout out, is PragerU. That's also been just so, I think, impactful for so many young people. Okay, we only have a few more minutes left, and I want to make sure we touch on this because this was a really big thing that just happened a couple of days ago, was the passing of the Take It Down Act. I know you've been tracking this story, and this is something that I think is also really important for young people. So tell us a little bit about what happened and why is it important?
Yeah, so this happened this past week in D.C. Melania spoke alongside her husband, President Trump, with the passing of the Take It Down Act. Melania's initiative this term is the Be Best initiative, which goes hand in hand. And this really is protecting children and women against AI deepfakes and what they're calling non-consensual intimate content. And so any time that AI deepfakes are shared online, a victim can report them. And these platform has 48 hours to take it down. So this is really giving the power back to the victim, because we've seen so many cases already on social media be harmed by the fake pornographic material. And we have, honestly, Senator Ted Cruz to thank for the pushing forward of this legislation. And one thing that I want to note about this instant with this new law that is now signed is it truly has been a bipartisan act since the beginning. And it shows that although we don't know what is to come on social media, something that both the left and the right do agree on and can put forth into a law, in an act, is that we need to protect women and children from online predators in the form of AI deepfakes and non-consensual content that is shared.
I loved seeing that this went through. I loved seeing the bipartisan support for it. I think even though I know how divided we are right now, it is nice when something common sense brings us together. And I was surprised, even some of the big unions like SAG and AFTRA were giving credit to Melania and to President Trump for passing this and signing it into law. And I think it's great and forward thinking and a really great way to protect our kids. And I can only imagine some of the horror stories. I mean, you hear that's resulting in people's suicides when this stuff goes too far. So this is important.
That's incredibly important. I mean, we can even talk about, if you want to talk about a star, Taylor Swift was one of the victims of AI deepfakes with that non-consensual, false pornographic images that were made. And so seeing how this is not just impacting locals, but celebrities, this is, I think, an incredible act, and that is now a law to criminalize this behavior. And I think that anybody that is a part of the distribution of these fake images or creation of them should be criminalized for it.
All right,
can I sneak in one last question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because this brings up Melania, who, she's such an interesting character. when Donald Trump came down the escalator, famously, I was not an early adopter, Jen, the way you were. It took me a little bit of time to get on board. I was an early Ted Cruz supporter, but I then very quickly got on board the Trump train. But it took me longer to really get on board with Melania, right? Because I knew about her past, something about her past, and she had some like salacious pictures, and she'd been a model. But I think she has become such a role model. I don't know. I think that she's there are so many things about it I could talk about. But I will say this: like, I thought one of the most interesting sort of moments for her was the inauguration this year, and the way she presented herself, the outfits she chose, and almost her austerity. And that, you really felt her communicating to the world, you are not going to mess with my family the way you did the last time. And if you want to get to them, you're going to have to come through me. Okay, so that's my take on Melania. I think she is a force to reckon with. I'm just curious, Morgan, from your perspective, how do you see her, and do you see it similarly?
I've always admired Melania Trump. I like to say class is back in the White House. Somebody who actually loves and appreciates American excellence, has a sense of fashion, and actually, I think cares about this country more than a lot of people realize because of her immigration story. And, she really built herself up within the country. And obviously now being first lady, I think is incredible. Like, I look up to her. I know many women do, especially in the fashion industry. I would love to see her on the cover of major fashion magazines because the last 4 years really was a disgrace, in my opinion.
No. And she used to do fashion magazines, only marrying Donald Trump and becoming first lady, and she's off the covers. All right, final question, and it's just a quick one because I think the border certainly was the driving issue for President Trump this time around. Obviously, Joe Biden gave us a whole slew of reasons, and so the people operating his auto pen gave us a whole slew of reasons not to vote for a Democrat again. But if you could give advice from Gen Z to the Republican Party, what should be that top issue that we focus on? Is it quality of life? Is it the border, safety? What would you recommend?
Personally, right now, I would say that the border, it should be the number one focus of actually letting the mass deportations happen, going beyond, violent criminals in our country is, they're all criminals in this country because they cross the border, and America is not the house for everybody just because you come here. Second, I would tell the Republican Party, don't ignore Gen Z and continue to, push the envelope a little bit more. I think that a lot of our country is hungry for a little bit more truth and be more like Trump in the sense of don't be afraid. But issues-wise, I would say definitely the border, and next up tackling cost of living, especially with college campuses. A lot of kids are going to college, getting debt, graduating, not able to get a job, not able to afford living. And I think that the government can really help with that.
Love it. You have been so much fun to talk to, Morgan. You're truly an honorary happy woman. You belong right in here. We've got all of the different
happy woman, so I love it.
It's fabulous. All right, Morgonn McMichael, thank you so much. Remember her code for the women's conference from TPUSA. It's MORGONN. If you want to go, that's in Dallas in the middle of June. And check that out. She's a Turning Point contributor. She's a Gen Z political commentator. Follow her at Morgan M on X, at Morgan MORGONN on Instagram. Morgan, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you both so much for having me. I had so much fun.
Absolutely. And don't forget to get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. You can get that wherever you get your books, and perfectly appropriate for today's discussion. You can also check her out online, katiegorka.org. Search for her on Facebook, Catherine Gorka, and on X at Gorka Katie. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jennifer Horn Radio, and on X and on Truth at Jennifer Horn. And don't forget those 5-star reviews and sharing Happy Women with your friends. We really appreciate you. You can connect with us on all of our platforms at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Happy Women. Thanks for joining us. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.